The night was cold and wet in downtown Chicago. Rain fell steadily, turning the streets into shiny mirrors that reflected the dim glow of streetlights. It was late, and most people had already gone home to escape the weather. But not everyone had a place to go. Near an old abandoned building with graffiti covering its cracked walls, a man lay huddled under a dirty blanket. His clothes were torn and soaked from the rain, and his face was hidden beneath messy hair and a thick layer of stubble. He looked like any other homeless person trying to survive another miserable night. Two police officers approached him cautiously. Officer Ryan, a tall man with short brown hair, held his flashlight steady as he scanned the area. Beside him, Officer Kelly adjusted her hat against the rain. She glanced at the man lying on the ground and sighed. This wasn't the first time they'd dealt with someone sleeping rough in this part of town. "Hey," Ryan called out, his voice firm but not unkind. "Sir, you okay?" The man didn't respond right away. He shifted slightly under the blanket, mumbling something too quiet for them to hear. Ryan took a step closer, shining the light directly on him. The man squinted, raising a hand to shield his eyes from the glare. "We're going to need you to move along," Ryan said, louder this time. "You can't stay here." The man finally looked up, revealing tired, bloodshot eyes. For a moment, he just stared at the officers without saying anything. Then, in a raspy voice, he muttered, "They're coming. Can't let them get through." Officer Kelly frowned. "Who's coming? What are you talking about?" The man shook his head, clutching the edges of his blanket tighter around himself. "You wouldn't understand. Just keep them safe." Ryan exchanged a glance with Kelly. They'd heard plenty of strange things while working the streets, but something about this guy felt different. There was a wildness in his eyes, like he believed every word he was saying. Still, none of that mattered if he refused to cooperate. "Listen," Ryan said, kneeling down to get closer to the man. "I don't know what's going on with you, but we can't have you staying here. If you don't leave voluntarily, we'll have to take you in." The man didn't move. Instead, he started muttering again, almost to himself. "It never ends. Always watching, always waiting." Kelly sighed and reached for her radio. "We're bringing him in," she said into it. "Looks like we've got another vagrant who needs processing." As they helped, or rather forced the man to his feet, one of them noticed something unusual. On his left forearm, peeking out from under his sleeve, was a tattoo. It wasn't like any ordinary tattoo. It consisted of numbers and strange symbols, arranged in a pattern that made no sense. Ryan tilted his head, studying it closely. "What's this?" he asked, pointing at the marking. The man froze for a second, then pulled his arm away sharply. "Don't touch that," he snapped, his tone suddenly sharp and defensive. "Relax," Ryan said, holding up his hands. "Just curious." They escorted him to the squad car, ignoring his protest as they pushed him into the back seat. Once inside, the man leaned forward, pressing his forehead against the metal divider. He seemed defeated now, his earlier defiance replaced by a deep sadness. At the station, things only got stranger. When they ran his fingerprints through the system, a routine procedure, they expected nothing unusual. Homeless individuals rarely showed up in databases unless they had prior arrests. But when the results came back, the screen displayed a single line of text. "Classified. Contact Pentagon immediately." Everyone in the room stopped what they were doing. Officers exchanged confused glances, unsure how to react. Who was this man, and why did the Pentagon care about him? Officer Kelly leaned over to Ryan, lowering her voice. "What do you think this means?" Ryan shrugged, though his expression betrayed his unease. "No idea, but I'm guessing we're about to find out." Within minutes, the phone rang. A high-ranking official from the Pentagon was on the line, demanding immediate custody of the prisoner. By the end of the call, the entire precinct knew something big was happening. Whatever secrets this homeless man carried, they were far more dangerous and important than anyone could have imagined. For now, all they could do was wait. It didn't take long for the situation to escalate. Within hours of the mysterious message flashing across the screen, "Classified, contact Pentagon immediately," a convoy of vehicles arrived at the police station. The sound of tires screeching on wet pavement echoed through the quiet night as a sleek black SUV pulled up to the entrance, followed by 2 armored trucks. Soldiers clad in tactical gear poured out of the vehicles, their movements precise and efficient. They carried weapons that looked far more advanced than anything the officers had ever seen. Leading the group was a woman who commanded attention without saying a word. She wore a crisp military uniform decorated with medals and insignias, her short gray hair framing a face lined with authority. Her name tag read Harper, and her rank marked her as a colonel. Colonel Harper wasted no time introducing herself or explaining why she was there. Instead, she marched straight into the station, her boots clicking sharply against the tiled floor. The officers inside scrambled to their feet, unsure how to react. One of them, Officer Ryan, stepped forward hesitantly. "Ma'am, can we help?" "You?" Colonel Harper stopped just inches away from him, her piercing eyes locking onto his. "Where is he?" she demanded, her voice low but firm. Ryan blinked, taken aback by her intensity. "Who? The man we brought in earlier?" "Yes," she snapped, cutting him off. "Jonathan Hayes. Where is he?" The room fell silent. No one had mentioned the name Jonathan Hayes before. To everyone present, the prisoner was simply a homeless man picked up off the streets, but Colonel Harper's tone suggested she knew far more about him than they did. "He's in holding," Ryan stammered, pointing toward the back of the station. "But I thought his name was Jack Monroe." Colonel Harper ignored him and signaled to her team. 2 soldiers moved past the officers, heading directly to the holding cells. Moments later, they returned with the man in tow. He looked even worse under the harsh fluorescent lights of the station. His clothes were still damp, his hair unkempt, and his expression vacant. Yet when he saw Colonel Harper, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe even fear. "John," Colonel Harper said, her voice softer now but still commanding, "we need to talk." The man, John, didn't respond immediately. He stared at her, his jaw tightening slightly. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I told you, I'm done." Harper shook her head. "You don't get to decide that. Not anymore." Officer Kelly stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "Excuse me, ma'am, but what's going on here? Who is this guy?" Colonel Harper turned to face her, her gaze unwavering. "Classified," she replied curtly, "and none of your concern." She gestured to one of her men, who handed her a tablet. After tapping a few commands, she showed the screen to the officers. On it was a file labeled Project Sentinel, along with a photo of John, but not as he appeared now. In the picture, he looked younger, clean-shaven and wearing a military uniform. The resemblance was undeniable. "This man," Harper continued, "is Lieutenant Jonathan Hayes, formerly of the United States Special Forces. He volunteered for a classified program years ago, one designed to protect this country and this planet from threats beyond your comprehension." The officers exchanged looks, unsure whether to believe her. It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie, but the evidence was right in front of them, undeniable and overwhelming. "What kind of threats?" Officer Ryan asked cautiously. Harper hesitated, glancing at John briefly before answering. "Extraterrestrial, aliens, whatever term you prefer. And if you think I'm joking, ask yourselves why I'm standing here with a full tactical unit instead of sending a couple of agents." Her words sent a chill through the room. No one spoke for a moment, the weight of her statement sinking in. Finally, Officer Kelly broke the silence. "So, what happens now?" "Now," Harper said, turning back to John, "he comes with us. Everything related to him, including your reports, surveillance footage, and even your memories of tonight, will be confiscated. You'll forget this ever happened." Before anyone could protest, her team sprang into action. They began collecting files, cameras, and anything else that might contain information about John. The officers watched helplessly as their precinct was systematically stripped of evidence. By the time they left, it was as though John Hayes had never existed. As the convoy drove away, John sat silently in the back of one of the armored trucks, his hands cuffed. He stared out the window at the passing city lights, his mind racing. He knew exactly where they were taking him, a secure facility somewhere outside Washington, D.C., where questions would be asked and answers demanded. And he knew what those answers might cost him. Colonel Harper rode in the lead vehicle, her expression unreadable. She had spent years hunting down former participants of Project Sentinel, ensuring they remained hidden, or eliminated if necessary. But John was different. He was the only one who had managed to escape completely, erasing his identity so thoroughly that even she had trouble finding him. Now, after all these years, he was back in her custody. Whether he liked it or not, his days of hiding were over. The drive lasted several hours, during which John refused to speak. When they finally arrived at the facility, he was escorted inside and placed in a stark white room with no windows. Cameras monitored his every move, and armed guards stood outside the door. For the first time since his arrest, John felt truly trapped. Colonel Harper entered the room shortly afterward, carrying a folder filled with documents. She set it down on the table in front of him and took a seat, studying him carefully. "You've been dodging us for a long time, John," she began, her tone measured. "Impressive, considering the resources we threw at finding you. But now it's over. We need answers, and you're going to give them to us." John leaned back in his chair, meeting her gaze steadily. "What makes you think I'll cooperate?" Harper smiled thinly. "Because if you don't, millions of lives could be at risk, including yours." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The gravity of her words hung heavy in the air. John knew she wasn't bluffing. If the aliens had found him once, they could find him again. And next time, they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. "All right," John said finally, breaking the silence. "I'll talk, but not here, not like this." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Then where?" John hesitated, weighing his options. "Somewhere secure. Somewhere you won't interrupt me halfway through." Harper studied him for a moment longer before nodding. "Fine. But make no mistake, if you try anything, you won't live to regret it." With that, she stood and left the room, leaving John alone with his thoughts. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could turn this situation to his advantage. And maybe, just maybe, he could finally put an end to the nightmare that had haunted him for so long. The interrogation room was cold, almost sterile. John sat slumped in his chair, his wrists still cuffed, staring at the floor as if trying to will himself invisible. Across the table, Colonel Harper watched him intently, her sharp eyes never leaving his face. She tapped the folder in front of her lightly, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "Start talking," she said, her voice calm but firm. "What do you know about the recent activity?" John didn't answer right away. He raised his head slowly, meeting her gaze with a mixture of defiance and weariness. For years he had lived under the radar, avoiding anyone who might recognize him or drag him back into the life he desperately wanted to leave behind. Now here he was, sitting in a room that felt more like a prison than freedom. "You wouldn't believe me even if I told you," John muttered finally, his voice rough from disuse. Harper leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Try me," John hesitated, then sighed deeply. "Fine, but first tell your people outside to leave. This isn't something they need to hear." Harper narrowed her eyes, studying him carefully. After a moment, she nodded toward the guards, standing silently behind her. They exchanged glances but obeyed, stepping out of the room and closing the heavy door behind them. Once they were alone, John took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. "I was part of Project Sentinel," he began, his voice low but steady. "It wasn't just some military experiment. It was supposed to prepare us for something bigger, something no one saw coming." Harper listened without interrupting, though her expression remained guarded. She already knew most of this, but hearing it from John himself was different. There was a weight to his words, a raw honesty that couldn't be faked. "They gave us treatments, drugs, surgeries, genetic modifications, made us stronger, faster, smarter, At first it seemed like a miracle. We could do things normal humans couldn't dream of, but— He paused, shaking his head. But there was a price. Most of us, we couldn't handle it, lost our minds. Some even died. Harper nodded slowly, encouraging him to continue. She had read the reports, seen the casualty numbers. What she hadn't known was how deeply personal this story was for John. I survived, he continued, his voice quieter now, but I realized what they really wanted, to turn us into weapons. Not protectors, not defenders, weapons. So I ran, faked my death, erased my identity, and disappeared. I thought I'd left all of it behind. But you didn't, Harper interjected, her tone sharper now. Because they found you. John clenched his fists, the chains rattling softly. Yeah, they did. And trust me, when they come looking, it's not good news. They're not human, Harper. They're not from here. Whatever experiments the government did on us, they learned it from them. Studying their tech, their biology, trying to fight fire, with fire. Harper frowned, leaning back in her chair. Who are they? Be specific. John hesitated again, choosing his words carefully. They call themselves the Varn, or at least that's what we called them. They're not conquerors, not exactly, more like scavengers. They move from planet to planet, stripping resources, taking whatever they want, and leaving destruction behind. When they came here, they weren't expecting resistance. That's where we came in, or rather where I came in. He stopped, his jaw tightening as memories flooded back. I helped stop them once. Barely. It cost us everything. The program, the team, lives. After that I knew I couldn't keep doing it. I couldn't let them use me again. Harper studied him closely, weighing his words. Despite herself, she believed him. There was too much pain in his voice, too much regret for it to be anything but the truth. Still, there was one question she needed answered. If you walked away, why are they after you now? She asked. Why wait so long? John's expression darkened. Because they're back, and this time they're not messing around. They've been watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I thought staying hidden would keep everyone safe, but— He trailed off, his shoulders sagging. I guess I was wrong. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what he'd said hung heavy in the air. Then Harper reached into the folder and pulled out a photograph. She slid it across the table toward him. It showed a group of soldiers standing together, their faces grim but determined. In the center of the group was a younger John, smiling faintly despite the obvious tension in the picture. This was your team, Harper said quietly. The ones who fought alongside. You. Do you miss them? John glanced at the photo but quickly looked away. Every day, he admitted. But missing them doesn't bring them back. Doesn't change what happened. Harper nodded, understanding more than she let on. She closed the folder and stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. For now, we'll protect you, she said firmly. Whatever it takes, but you need to cooperate fully. No secrets, no lies. Understand? John met her gaze, his own filled with conflicted emotions. Finally, he nodded. Understood. As Harper left the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Whoever, or whatever, was hunting John wasn't going to wait patiently while they prepared. The storm he had warned about was closer than anyone realized, and when it hit, nothing would ever be the same again. It started with small things, little signs that something wasn't right. At first, it was easy to dismiss them as glitches or coincidences. Power flickered sporadically throughout the facility, leaving sections of the compound plunged into darkness. Security cameras captured fleeting movements just beyond their range, shadows darting too quickly to be identified. But then came the noises, faint scraping sounds against the walls like claws dragging across metal, followed by low, guttural growls that sent shivers down everyone's spines. Colonel Harper noticed the changes immediately. She ordered her team to double the patrols and secure all entrances, but even she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. John, meanwhile, remained quiet, observing everything from his holding cell. He knew what was coming long before anyone else did. They're here, he said one evening, speaking to no one in particular. Two soldiers stationed outside his door exchanged uneasy glances but didn't respond. They had been told not to engage with him unless necessary. That night, the facility came under siege. It began with a sudden power outage, plunging the entire compound into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on moments later, bathing the corridors in a dim red glow. Alarms screamed throughout the building, jolting everyone awake. Soldiers scrambled to their posts, weapons drawn, while scientists and support staff huddled together in designated safe zones. Outside, the true nature of the threat became clear. Dozens of alien creatures swarmed the perimeter, their bodies made of a strange, shifting metallic material that reflected the moonlight. They moved unnaturally, flowing like liquid, yet striking with terrifying speed. When the soldiers opened fire, their bullets passed harmlessly through the creatures, doing nothing to slow their advance. Inside the facility, Colonel Harper barked orders into her radio, trying to coordinate a defense. "Fall back to the inner chambers," she shouted. "Seal off all access points." But the aliens weren't interested in breaching the walls, not yet. Instead, they seemed focused on finding something, or someone. Their presence filled the air with an oppressive weight, making it hard to breathe, harder still to think clearly. Panic spread among the personnel, some breaking ranks and running blindly in fear. John watched the chaos unfold from his cell, his expression unreadable. He knew exactly who the aliens were looking for, and why. Turning to the two guards posted outside his door, he spoke calmly but urgently. "You need to let me out," he said. "If you want any chance of surviving this, you'll listen to me." The guards hesitated, glancing at each other uncertainly. One of them, a young man named Carter, finally stepped forward. "Why should we trust you?" "Because I'm the only one who knows how to fight them," John replied, his voice steady. "And if you don't let me out now, we're all dead." Carter hesitated again, but the sound of explosions growing closer made up his mind. With a nod to his partner, he unlocked the cell door and stepped aside. John emerged slowly, his hands still cuffed, but his demeanor had changed completely. Gone was the defeated homeless man. In his place stood a soldier ready for battle. "Get me to Harper," John said, his tone leaving no room for argument. They found Colonel Harper in the command center, where she was frantically issuing orders over the radio. The room was crowded with terrified staff members, their faces pale and drawn. When John entered, flanked by the two guards, Harper turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing out of your cell?" she demanded. "I'm here to help," John replied simply. "But I can't do that locked up." Harper studied him for a moment, then nodded sharply. "Fine. What do you need?" "A weapon," John said without hesitation. "And access to the security feeds. If I'm going to stop them, I need to know where they're weakest." Harper signaled to one of her men, who handed John a rifle. It wasn't the kind of weapon he was used to, but it would have to do. Together, they gathered around a bank of monitors, scanning the footage for patterns in the aliens' movements. John pointed out key details. The way they avoided certain areas, how they communicated silently, almost telepathically. "They're hunting me," John explained. "Not because they want revenge, but because they see me as a threat. As long as I'm alive, I'm dangerous to them." Harper frowned. "Then what's your plan? Sacrifice yourself to save us?" John shook his head. "Not yet. First, we buy ourselves some time. We hit them hard enough to make them rethink their strategy. Then we figure out how to end this for good." With that, John led a small team of soldiers to the outer perimeter, where the fighting was fiercest. Using tactics honed during his time in Project Sentinel, he directed the group to set traps using explosives and electromagnetic pulses. The aliens faltered when caught in the blasts, their metallic forms destabilizing momentarily before reforming. Despite their success, John knew this was only temporary. The aliens wouldn't give up easily, and reinforcements could arrive at any moment. As the initial wave retreated, John turned to Harper, his expression grim. "This isn't over," he said. "They'll be back." stronger and angrier. And next time they won't hold back. Harper nodded, her resolve unwavering. Then we prepare. Whatever it takes, we'll be ready. For the first time since the attack began, John allowed himself a small smile. Maybe, just maybe, humanity stood a chance after all. But deep down he knew the real battle was only beginning. The battle raged on, relentless and unforgiving. Inside the facility, every corner seemed to echo with the sounds of gunfire, screams, and the eerie screeches of the alien invaders. John moved quickly, his mind sharp and calculating despite the chaos around him. He had spent years running from his past, but now there was no escape. This was where he belonged, in the thick of it, fighting to protect those who couldn't fight for themselves. As he led a small team of soldiers deeper into the compound, John spotted Emily Dawson, a young medic struggling to carry an injured soldier to safety. Her face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but her eyes burned with determination. Without hesitation, John ran to her side, helping lift the wounded man onto a nearby stretcher. "You shouldn't be out here," John said, his voice firm yet not unkind. "It's too dangerous." Emily shook her head, her jaw set. "I'm not leaving anyone behind. Not while I can still help." John studied her for a moment, seeing something in her that reminded him of himself long ago. A refusal to give up, even when the odds were stacked against them. He nodded briefly before turning, back to the task at hand. "Stay close then, and keep your head down." Together they pushed forward, navigating the maze-like corridors of the facility. Explosions rocked the building, sending debris raining down from the ceiling. The aliens were relentless, their metallic forms flowing like liquid as they breached one barrier after another. Every time the defenders thought they had gained ground, the creatures adapted, finding new ways to press their advantage. John knew they couldn't hold out forever. The aliens weren't just attacking blindly, they were searching for him. Their leader, a towering figure with glowing red eyes, seemed to command the others telepathically, directing their movements with eerie precision. John could feel its gaze following him, even when it wasn't visible. "We need to draw them away from the civilians," John said to Harper over the radio. "If we can lure them into the main hall, we might have a chance to trap them." Harper's voice crackled through the line. "Do it. But be careful, John. We can't afford to lose you." John didn't respond. Instead, he signaled to the soldiers around him, relaying his plan. They would create a diversion, drawing the aliens toward the central chamber where a series of EMP devices had been rigged. It was risky, but it was their best shot. As they moved into position, Emily stayed by John's side, refusing to leave. "I want to help," she insisted when he tried to send her back. "You're going to need someone watching your back." John hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But if things go south, you run. No arguments." The diversion worked better than expected. The aliens surged toward the main hall, their forms rippling with anticipation. John and his team retreated to a secure control room overlooking the chamber, waiting for the right moment to activate the EMPs. Below them, the creatures gathered, their glowing eyes fixed on the spot where John had stood moments earlier. "Now!" John shouted, slamming his fist down on the activation switch. The room erupted in a blinding flash of light as the EMPs discharged, sending waves of electromagnetic energy coursing through the chamber. The aliens shrieked in agony, their metallic bodies destabilizing as the pulse disrupted their internal systems. For a brief moment, it seemed like the tide had turned, but the victory was short-lived. As the EMPs powered down, the alien leader emerged from the chaos, its form larger and more menacing than before. It locked eyes with John, its red gaze burning with fury and malice. "You cannot win," it hissed, its voice echoing in John's mind. "You are ours." John tightened his grip on his rifle, stepping forward despite the fear gnawing at him. "Maybe, but I'll take as many of you down with me as I can." The alien leader raised a clawed hand, signaling its followers to advance. John braced himself, ready to make his stand. Beside him, Emily loaded a fresh magazine into her weapon, her hands trembling but steady. "You don't have to do this alone," she said quietly. We're with you. John glanced at her, then at the soldiers lining up behind him. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope. Not because he believed they could win, but because he realized he wasn't fighting alone anymore. These people, strangers until hours ago, had chosen to stand with him against impossible odds. The final assault began. Bullets flew, and the air was filled with the sound of combat. John fought with everything he had, using every trick and tactic he'd learned during Project Sentinel. He moved like a ghost, striking hard and fast before disappearing into the smoke. Emily stayed close, treating wounds and providing cover whenever she could. Despite their efforts, the aliens kept coming. One by one, the defenders fell, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. John knew they were running out of time. If something didn't change soon, the entire facility would be overrun. Then it hit him, the failsafe. Deep within his body, hidden beneath layers of flesh and bone, was a device implanted during his time in Project Sentinel. It was designed as a last resort, capable of releasing a massive pulse of energy strong enough to disable alien technology, but at a cost. Activating it would mean sacrificing himself. He hesitated, torn between survival and duty. Then he looked at Emily, her face streaked with tears but resolute. She deserved a future free from this nightmare. So did everyone else. Listen to me, John said, grabbing her arm. When I tell you to run, don't stop. Get as far away as you can. What are you talking about? Emily demanded, her voice rising. You're not doing anything stupid. John, I'm ending this, he replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. Trust me. Before she could respond, John broke away, charging straight toward the alien leader. Its glowing eyes widened in surprise as he closed the distance, activating the failsafe with a single thought. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Run! John shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. Emily hesitated, tears streaming down her face. Then, with one last look at John, she turned and ran, dragging other survivors with her. The pulse detonated moments later, engulfing the chamber in a brilliant burst of light. The aliens screamed as their forms disintegrated, unable to withstand the overwhelming energy. When the light faded, the room was silent, save for the faint crackle of electricity. John collapsed to his knees, his body racked with pain. He knew the end was near, but he smiled faintly, knowing he had done what he set out to do. Around him, the facility lay in ruins, but the people inside were safe for now. As darkness closed in, John whispered a single word. Worth it. The silence that followed the explosion was deafening. For a moment, no one moved. Survivors huddled together outside the facility, their faces pale and drawn as they tried to process what had just happened. Emily Dawson sat on the ground, her knees pulled tight against her chest, staring at the building where John had made his final stand. She clutched the folded American flag in her hands, its red, white, and blue colors standing out starkly against the gray ash and rubble around. Her Colonel Harper approached cautiously, her usual stern demeanor softened by grief. She knelt beside Emily, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. He saved us all, Harper said quietly. We owe him everything. Emily nodded slowly, her voice trembling when she finally spoke. He didn't have to do it. He could have run, could have lived. Harper sighed, looking toward the wreckage. Men like John don't run. They fight until there's nothing left to give. That's who he was. A protector, even if he didn't want to admit it. As the hours passed, the survivors began cleaning up the damage. Bodies were recovered, both human and alien, though the latter dissolved into dust shortly after exposure to sunlight. The alien's leader had vanished during the pulse, leaving behind only faint traces of its presence. Whether it was truly gone or merely retreating remained unclear, but for now the immediate threat had been neutralized. Days later, a memorial service was held for those who had fallen. Soldiers, scientists, and civilians gathered under a clear sky, standing shoulder to shoulder as Colonel Harper delivered a eulogy. Her words were simple yet powerful, honoring not just John, but everyone who had given their lives to protect others. Lieutenant Jonathan Hayes was more than a soldier. Harper said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. He was a man who chose to walk away from war, only to return when we needed him most. His sacrifice will never be forgotten, and his legacy will live on in each of us. When the ceremony ended, Emily lingered behind, staring at the makeshift plaque bearing John's name. She felt a mix of sorrow and gratitude, knowing she would never forget the man who had changed her life forever. Months passed, and life slowly returned to some semblance of normalcy. The facility was rebuilt, stronger and more secure than before. But Emily carried John's memory with her wherever she went. When she discovered she was pregnant, she knew exactly what to name her child. Jonathan, she whispered, cradling her newborn son in her arms, after the bravest man I ever met. Years later, little Jonathan grew up hearing stories about the man he was named after. Emily told him how his namesake had fought impossible odds to save humanity, teaching him the values of courage, selflessness, and resilience. Though John himself was gone, his spirit lived on in the hearts of those he had touched. Far beyond Earth's atmosphere, the alien leader drifted silently in deep space, its form fragmented but still intact. It remembered the human who had defied it, the one called Jonathan Hayes, and though it vowed to return someday, it couldn't deny the respect it felt for the man who had stood alone against an entire race. Back on Earth, humanity continued to rebuild, unaware of the looming threat in the stars. But thanks to John's sacrifice, they had been given a second chance, a chance to prepare, to unite, and to survive. Somewhere, in the vast expanse of the universe, John's legacy endured, a beacon of hope in the endless darkness.